Okay, so before we can begin, can someone confirm that you can actually hear me?
I can.
Beautiful, wonderful. We're already off to a better start than we were last month. So thank you for joining us again for the Women in Resilience Leadership webinar series. For any new listeners, my name is Bree, and I'd like to begin by letting everyone know that this series is being presented live for those who appreciate an interactive forum, and it's also being recorded and disseminated to all who have registered. Last month, we discussed some of the trials and tribulations of all corporate women and how those trials can be compounded for women in resilience leadership roles. We took a brief look at the various discriminations women face in the workplace, from gender bias to family responsibility discrimination, and one that was brought up by one of our participants, age discrimination. If you didn't receive the link to that recording and you would like to take a listen, please let me know by sending me an email or using the chat function. In the last webinar, I also mentioned my colleague, Samantha Taylor, who was unable to attend, but who was instrumental in launching this webinar series. Well, it's my pleasure to introduce Sam, who'll be co-hosting with me today. Sam is Resilient Services Emergency Management Specialist. Sam, can you please tell everyone a little about yourself?
Thank you, Bree, for the introduction. Hello, everyone. I'm so glad that I can finally meet you all, and thank you for joining us today. I will tell you a bit about myself and my background. I'm a mum, I'm a wife with two beautiful school-age children who love to be adventurous, and by adventurous, I mean strong-willed and demanding. As all Victoria is now on remote learning, I hope you can all forgive me for any interruptions that may occur as they are home with me today. I have been with Resilient Services for 10 months now and come from a training and management background. I have the opportunity to utilise my skills in many different industries, gaining more and more experience over the years. But I always felt that something was missing, important that was missing from my work life. I came to Resilient Services in hope to find a career path that I truly have a big passion for, and that was emergency management. I have since found that not only have I succeeded in that dream, but I have also managed to gain more experience, knowledge, and a company that supports their employees in all that we do. I have really enjoyed being a part of the Women in Resilience Leadership series, as I found in my working journey that this is an area to which I believe could change for the better. I myself have experienced a few challenges in my working life because I have young children or just because I am a woman. I live in hope that one day we're able to change the ways that male-dominated industries, ways of a male-dominated industry, and thrive in an environment that is encouraging of women and what we can bring to the table.
Okay, thanks, Sam. So today we'll be talking to you about organisational culture, why it's important, the good and the bad, the cultures that work well for women, and some small steps to create big waves in your organisations. It seems I talk a lot about culture, I know. I mentioned it a few times last month, and I plan on mentioning the word a lot today. I'll probably even mention it next time. Well, there's a good reason for that. Culture can actually make or break a workplace.
Some people may not understand the impact an organisational culture has on their experience at work, but those that do will tell you that a good culture promotes efficiency, satisfaction, innovation, and compassion, whereas toxic cultures breed disharmony, bureaucracy, resentment, and white anting. I have to tell you that I have worked in some pretty toxic cultures over the years. Some were about blame in the place of accountability, some valued dishonesty, nepotism, and backdoor dealings rather than communication, merit-based hiring and promoting, and compliance. The worst part is, it wasn't until I found myself in an organisation with a great culture that I realised that these issues were culture driven.
I know what you mean, Sam. I have left jobs before over cultural issues. The worst I've dealt with was a culture which actually valued bullying. The bigger the bully, the higher their rose. I hated going to work, and I felt so great when I resigned from that job. And we see similar stories so often, women leaving organisations due to toxic and unsupportive cultures. It's why we'll focus later on things to do and things to avoid when trying to implement culture change.
I think one of the first things that we need to understand when talking about culture and changing organisational culture is what attributes do we want in our culture? What will it take to ensure that culture has a strong foundation throughout the business?
Well, there are 4 common and distinct types of cultures that we have probably all had dealings with throughout our careers. They are clan culture, adhocracy culture, market culture, and hierarchy culture. Each has its own distinct values and pillars, and each comes with positives and negatives. Let's take a closer look at each of these.
First off, we've got the clan culture. Clan culture is characterised by a family environment. The main pillar of the clan culture is collaboration. Everyone is encouraged to work together, share ideas, and collaborate. Think large, cohesive family with strong bonds. Clan culture can create a healthy working environment, clear communication, great feedback loops, and idea sharing. While this can sound almost idyllic to some, it can have its downfalls. One in particular is that this emphasis on collaboration can erode accountability and actually hinder progress. This type of culture seems to be popular among small companies and startups. Here's a little fact for you. Did you know that women make up just 1 in 5 startup founders?
I didn't, Sam. But next we have adhocracy culture. The real focus here is on the words ad hoc. It is underscored by a dynamic and innovative environment where employees are willing to take chances and are supported by leaders to do so. Leaders in adhocracy culture are typically seen as inspirational innovators, willing to challenge assumptions and take risks themselves. Adhocracy values change and agility above all else. Some of the pros here are that adhocracy can lead to high profit margins, employee motivation, and of course, a real chance to innovate. Some of the drawbacks, however, are that, well, risk is risky, and adhocracy can lead to competition in-house and employees feeling pressure to perform. Some big companies that have thrived with this type of culture are Google, Facebook, and Apple.
Next, we have market culture. Market culture prioritises profitability above all else. The goal is always to get down to business, get work done, and achieve results, targets, and quotas. A lot of companies with market culture are successful. They have a very clear objective for all employees to get behind and work toward. The downside is it creates a very competitive environment, even among co-workers. And with everything you do at work tied to profit and market share alone, it's difficult to get meaningful engagement out of your employees. This type of culture is generally found within the mammoth organisations. I mean mammoth both in size and age.
And last, we have hierarchy culture. The hierarchy culture is all about structure and stability, as the name suggests. Please excuse me a moment. We have a participant in the waiting room. Sam, have you managed to join us? Okay, I believe Sam is in here now. Sorry, I was just saying about hierarchy culture, and it's all about structure and stability, values process and procedure, traditional corporate structures. It's cost, risks and mistakes are kept low due to following rules and guidelines of tried and tested practices. These organisations are defined by their rigid structures with several levels of management to separate employees and leadership. Hierarchy culture really sets the priorities of an organisation and provides clear direction. However, there is little room for creativity. So these organisations can be slow to adapt and they can be somewhat archaic and resistant to change. Hierarchy culture can be found in old school organisations like government, military, emergency services, and believe it or not, places like McDonald's and Hungry Jack's.
I think our organisational culture is a bit of a crossover between clan culture and adhocracy culture. What about you? Where does your organisation fit in? And more importantly, where would you like it to fit in?
So, what culture do women want? Well, in a 6,000 person study that looked at the organisational culture preferences, it's interesting that both men and women saw a huge value in the clan culture, with 35.1% of men preferring this culture and a whopping 38.23% of women saying the same. Interestingly, This seems to be the most common culture for both groups as well. What I also found fascinating was that the second most desired by both groups, the adhocracy culture, was actually the least prevalent at the time of the study. What this tells us is that women like to feel like they're part of the family at work, whilst being able to be creative and not being constricted by traditional hierarchy and male privilege. In addition, 77% of women care increasingly about workplace culture and believe it is important to help them thrive in the workplace. I wonder if anyone's actually surprised that women are so culture focused, or that clan and adhocracies were the most popular. They both sounded the best to me.
They sure do. Traditionally, organisational cultures have been developed by men, and the values of their gender tend to be reinforced by the organisation. Cultures shaped by men include hierarchy, independence, and top-down communications. In other words, do what I say, when I say it, and don't think for yourself. The male developed organisational cultures have also been related to the glass ceiling for women, whereas cultures shaped by women are more likely to value interpersonal relationships and the sharing of power. In other words, collaboration and recognition.
So we know that women like a clan culture with some creative and innovative allowances, and that we like collaboration and recognition for a job well done. That actually sounds great to me. But what else do we value in our cultures? What else is important to us? And what do we need to focus on as leaders who want to enrich or instill these cultures?
One of the things we found was employee engagement. Having employees who are emotionally and psychologically attached to their work and workplace is crucial to creating a positive employee relationships, and is a successful bottom line. Highly engaged employees are 17% more productive and have a 41% lower rate of absenteeism.
Next is employee retention, and that's just about incorporating regular fair pay rises and providing opportunity for upward mobility and making your employees feel secure.
Another one was workday flexibility. Ongoing research consistently finds that flexible scheduling and work from home options affect decisions to take or leave a job. Over half of employees say they would change jobs for flexible time. 37% of workers would be willing to move to a different job where they can work off-site at least part of the time.
Funnily enough, I don't think anyone's really worried about flexible working arrangements at the moment. However,
no, I don't think they are.
But another point to consider is improving communications with employees. So that's about checking in often. Frequent and informal chats with managers allows employees to understand how their daily work is linked to the company's goals. Data shows that employees who talk about their goals and successes with their manager at least every 6 months are almost 3 times more likely than other employees to feel engaged and motivated in their job. Be available. Let them know they're being heard, clarify and empathise with them.
Another one is build a strong employer brand. Attract the best.
In Australia, over 70% of organisations have a male-only team of management personnel. And it's clear to us all that these organisations are grappling with the issue of gender diversity. In an article written by Stuart Taylor in 2019, no relationship to Sam Taylor, I'm sure, he claims that the majority of working women lag behind their male counterparts in almost all factors of resilience. And whilst this sentence may make you balk at first and want to jump up and down, just like I did, when you read on, it is clear why it's perceived to be the case. The survey that said that we are less resilient, it looked at the fact that women are far more likely to be self-critical, to neglect our health, to feel overloaded or stressed in the workplace because we face professional and systemic challenges that our male counterparts don't. One of these challenges is simply the challenge of working while raising a family. I'm sure Sam knows a bit about that. Working women represent 90% of the single parent families, and a staggering 68% of women in the workforce have children under primary school age. So is it our high expectations that are eroding resilience in females, or is it a culture issue? Is it lack of flexible working arrangements, creativity, support and compassion? Where women feel confident prioritising their family needs when required, the anxiety is actually minimised. Archaic cultures are literally eroding women's resilience.
Employers can help by creating cultures that consider the needs of the individual, supporting people as a whole, not just as a drone, and fostering resilience in all aspects of their employees' lives. For every cultural shift or program, employers really need to ask one question. Will this make our people more resilient and hence more productive? When faced with challenges, resilient women show their strengths by minimising the impacts of distractibility, disengagement, and avoid self-absorption. With a resilient workforce, the result is female leaders who are happy at work, tactically agile, and lead to the purpose and optimism. So what's the connection between culture and resilience? Well, to me, it has several answers. Firstly, organisational culture increases a company's crisis preparedness and differentiates the crisis prepared from the crisis prone. In a study into the effect of organisational culture on crisis management in the hotel industry, poor organisational culture actually blocked the development of crisis management strategies and also the warning signals for a crisis. If there was a belief held by leaders and employees that it was someone else's problem or someone else's job, the company showed a propensity to overlook the lack of resilience within the organisations.
So what that means is during the crisis stage, bureaucracy slowed them down. Potentially quick decisions were slow and tedious. The willingness of employees to participate in crisis management activities was impacted by employee engagement, service length, and intention to remain in the organisation. So the people involved in responding to and recovering from the crises were not always the people that had the expertise to do so. An inherent blaming culture within these companies also led to concealment and fear of liability if employees actually noticed warning signs. And during the post-crisis stage, well, learnings weren't retained. They weren't documented, nor were they included into current practices. Defence mechanisms blocked the learning process. Staff training was minimal due to high turnover and hence high cost, which led to an underprepared workforce in each subsequent crisis. It is similar for organisations with cultures that make their staff feel oppressed, disengaged, and devalued. When the chips are down, no one wants to put their hand up, let their voice be heard, and help right the ship. So, what could or should they have done differently?
Well, there's been research done into what a culture in a resilient organisation actually looks like. According to one study, there are 3 things to look for. First one being conflict management, because people know how to build conflict. The most resilient company cultures are those that are good at conflict management. What does that look like exactly? In these organisations, it's common for people to interact with each other in a direct and constructive way. Work hard to understand others' point of view in a conflict and focus on researching alignment, even in difficult times. Second one was action. Execution is paramount in a crisis. Leaders may discuss and plan for a variety of scenarios, but they must take action along the way. Cultures that are most effective in challenging times are those where it is common for people to make timely decisions, effectively balance short and long-term demands, reliably deliver on commitments efficiently get things done. The third one was peer support. The final characteristic of any effective culture in challenging times is to support one another through changes. During a situation such as COVID-19 pandemic, many changes occur at a rapid pace and people need support from their peers to make it through.
Well, we're seeing that right now, aren't we?
Sure are.
So changing the culture of an organisation can be a challenging task. Employees or senior management may not be receptive to the changes. This can cause uncertainty of what will actually be achievable. There are a few tips that we can provide you that can help changes be implemented effectively and start creating a better culture.
One of the things we can set out to do is define a set of desired values and behaviours and define the non-negotiables. Have your leaders clearly describe the values and behaviours they are seeking and make sure that people can really relate to these day-to-day behaviours. Make sure that all employees from customer service to middle management and executives Understand what is expected.
Align culture with strategy and process. Look at your mission, vision, and values, and consider how they line up with your HR processes. This includes hiring, performance management, compensation, benefits, and the promotion of talent. Are your succession plans really creating the leaders you want in your organisations?
Connect culture with accountability. It is easy to forget your values in a crisis situation. This is an area that can really define how resilient your culture is. If a crisis is handled with your values in play and being accountable in some way for the crisis, then you will find that not only does your team get stronger, but so does your brand.
Measure it. We all know what gets measured is what gets managed. Help demonstrate the effectiveness of your efforts by implementing employee surveys and identifying gaps between desired and actual behaviours.
Do not rush it. Culture that is rushed does not become effective. Patience is key here. The time frame will depend on the size of the gap between the culture you have now compared to the culture you desire.
Invest now. Don't wait for employees and resources that may never come. It can take years for a culture that you build to become automatic in an organisation. So begin wherever you can and however you can. Culture change is not made overnight.
Be bold and lead. You do not have to be in a position of influence to have influence. When we step up, it encourages others to do the same. Leading by example is the key point in cultural changes.
Correct leadership tools. Using the correct leadership tools is important for cultural changes. Even if you're not in a management position, these skills can be demonstrated and adapted to become a better cultural setting for all employees around you, including yourself. We see all too often how the misuse of these tools can create a detrimental effect on the environment in an organisation, not only for ourselves, but for fellow employees. This leads to the 3 most common mistakes made when implementing changes to culture.
The first one we often see is the overuse of power tools, like coercion, threats, or punishment. Employees are less likely to respond to change if they feel threatened or coerced, or are coerced into changes, especially if they are failing to understand the vision that you have for your organisation. The second one is failing to implement the correct management tools, like management systems, strategic planning, and training. Once you do have your vision or story, it is important that you implement the management tools that will cement the behavioural changes. We quite often find that organisations have their vision but fail to apply the appropriate training, communication and strategies for it to succeed. Therefore, the cultural vision becomes lost and lacks the structure it needs to become reality. The third and final one is using power tools before the vision is clear. For a successful change to occur, the vision of what you want to achieve needs to be clear and concise. Trying to implement an unclear vision with the use of power tools can create an environment that is unstable. This is not a successful way to change a culture for the better. In fact, it does the opposite.
Now, before we close out today's session, Sam and I have done a lot of talking, so I want to turn it over to our participants. Now, I encourage you to ask questions, make comments, give us any thoughts that you have on today's webinar. The other thing, we're opening this up for discussion on the current COVID-19 situation. Particularly, we think it would be remiss not to actually mention what's happened in South Australia and Victoria over the last 24 hours. So for those who may not know, South Australia has made changes to gathering numbers in light of new cases. And Victoria, well, I'm guessing everyone is aware of the Premier's announcement yesterday and our new stage 4 restrictions. These new restrictions that I think will keep being changed for the foreseeable future because some of them don't actually seem workable yet. Anyone got anything they'd like to share? And Sam Payne, I encourage you to unmute and have a chat if you're there.
Good morning, ladies. Thanks for that. That was really good. I always love hearing the results of actual studies that have been conducted. Sort of those wide scale surveys that you get, because I think people have come to believe that they feel quite safe to give their opinion in those kind of environments, which is great. One thing I've never been a fan of is quotas. Quotas in businesses or organisation teams. So I think you hit that spot on, that it's about cultural change from the top, sort of, rather than more sort of systemic or process changes that you can put to ensure that women are represented in organisations. So I think that's really good. Well done on this. Yeah, all eyes on COVID. For those of us sitting over here in South Australia, we are thinking and feeling for you guys, being a Victorian fellow, almost 2 years over South Australia now myself. We definitely, we've got Beach Energy have a considerable team over in Victoria. We are, they've obviously all been working from home and been quite isolated since February, so we're definitely keeping our eye on them for a number of reasons, as well as wanting to keep our operations successfully and safely operating. So that's keeping us nice and busy. Yeah, we hope to see a change in those numbers definitely over the next few days. Yeah, in South Australia, I guess all eyes on the 2 international aircraft that are landing in South Australia today, to have all passengers about to be quarantined in hotels. So yeah, all eyes on that to see how that goes, and hopefully we've got some good lessons learnt from what happened in Victoria, hotel quarantining.
Yeah, well,
but that's what you can do. All you can do is learn and improve and learn and improve. So yeah.
Oh, absolutely. And look, as a Victorian, I wish you all the best with the quarantining of the internationals. I know that that's one place that Victoria definitely came unstuck and has really led to where we see ourselves today, which is quite a frightening position to be in, not just for ourselves, obviously, but for everyone out there. And we, of course, feel for everyone who's about to lose or has already lost their job. But at least right now, at least they still have their lives, which there's, too many people that don't due to COVID, particularly Victoria. I think we saw 13 deaths yesterday, which is, nowhere near as bad as we've seen in other parts of the world, but unfathomable for myself anyway.
Yeah, unfortunately, we've had another 11 overnight as well.
There we go. Thank you, Sam. I missed today's announcement being in another meeting. So, yeah, no, it's a very challenging thing for us all to be dealing with, but it is where we are. So, look, thank you for sharing your thoughts, Sam. Really appreciate that. I'd like to thank everyone who's listening today. And we look forward to receiving your feedback, comments, suggestions, and can't wait to see you in a month's time. Sam, if you'd like to hang around, that'd be great.